Well, greetings. Sawyer here, and talking kind of low so that I don't disturb Kathy, who's resting. And I'm going to share this with some Facebook folks. Yeah, I just headlined this. Was the saying about Jesus' return that every eye shall see him, real and metaphorical? And I say yes. That's the answer to my question. In my opinion, of course. Um, so what I'm referring to is wait, let me finish what I'm doing here with popping out my chat. Yes, I was referring to Revelation 1:7, where it says, "Behold, he cometh with." This is the King James version. Excuse the old English; it's not the best version, but it's adequate. I think the best versions are the versions that give you more uh, details of what was meant or was just as equally valid to interpret from the manuscripts. Like the Amplified version does that in the short sense, and then study versions, provide that in footnotes a lot of times. And what I did for the 10 years that I was working on the book that I wrote was I was using Strong's Concordance because I was in touch with the author of that book, that mammoth accomplishment. Um, and I asked him if I could use it. in my book? And he said yes. And he sold it for $8 for all kinds of material for online at the time. And then those documents ended up not working anymore with later versions of Windows. But what's his name? John Hurt, I think. Hurt, Hurt. I think is the name of the author of the Strong's Concordance and Hebrew and Greek dictionary. But when you look at that, the word in this verse that's written as see comes from number 3788, ophthalmos, ophthalmos, ophthalmos. And you could research it further to see where that comes from, but essentially it is a noun. So I guess it's the eye is the, it's what you see through your eye that's experiencing. And um, it's not just the just sight. Sight would be part of it because that's, through the eye. But so every eye shall see him. Um, uh, and, is talking about those that are at the time are alive and or at the time when he's available to be seen, and those that get a clue to pay attention to certain things that are being events that were taking place, like in 1975 when the UFO 2 came on the national story. I mean, before that, who did you have that had a modern view of coming from outer space with the breadth of knowledge and information and the character of the information that T and Doe had? And you won't find anybody. You'll find people with pieces. Like, I mean, there was, Adamski and other others that were considered to be contactees with space aliens, and I don't doubt that they were, because the space aliens have an interest in masquerading as the gods, the true gods, not the illusionary gods that, they claim they're gods, but they don't demonstrate godly perspectives. And, someone can say, well, who does? Because we don't even know, right? Who is really delivering that perspective, a godly perspective. And I say that it makes sense to me that this planet and the life forms on it that humans did not create, and the space aliens don't even say that they created them. Uh, from what I've seen, um, and if anybody sees otherwise, I'd like to see what who's talking about what in that regard. But considering the huge, intricate um, evidence of minds way beyond anything we can imagine, that became known as religion, known through the religions as existing. But I can't imagine that somebody looking at this creation and seeing how many systems work together or not, and the adaptation involved, in the genes and the evolution of it. This is what got revealed when TNO came on the public airwaves. That it was real, that it wasn't a superstition. I don't know why I do that. I'm watching myself after the fact on the screen there, and I stuck my hand there and on my neck. Sometimes I'm just not comfortable. And it's been a little, I'm a little tired and a little, a tired man says, hope you're doing well, man. Thank you. I'm doing okay. I'm doing good, actually. Kathy and I have been working hard and trying to make ends meet and try different things when ends aren't meeting very well. And by the way, since I brought that up, for those of you that know about my partner Kathy, she's been streaming quite a bit, just her by herself and also her with me when we're together, doing just normal things we do, every day, and whether that's driving in the car or like yesterday we went out to we're in Dallas now and Texas, and so we went over to we worked for New Year's Day and New Year's Eve, I mean, and we worked with deliveries. You can doesn't matter how many people you have in the car. When you drive passengers, which we both do as well, but you can't have anybody extra in the car. You have to provide four seats. So in most cars, that's a front seat and room for three people in the back. But so we were driving, and it was kind of a interesting time when it got to be at midnight, a little before that actually, and everybody was setting off their firecrackers and cherry bombs and bottle rockets and flare, all the other, you know, fireworks that, as a youngster, I certainly did a lot of that. It was illegal at the time, but myself and the people I traveled with, or in high school and stuff, we would go to the empty lot, where it was overgrown and somebody would be sitting in the middle of the lot. And we learned that that's where they would hang out selling fireworks, firecrackers, packs of firecrackers, bottle rockets, and cherry bombs, and ash cans, and all those different types of fireworks. And so somehow I would get some money and buy them each year and have a fun time setting them off. But something I never experienced in all the years that I did that, and I didn't do much of that after that, in terms of going to, firework displays that much. Um, when Kathy and I, when I was, when all those, firecrackers were being set off in this community in the Dallas area, I mean, it was like thick with smoke from all the gunpowder, I guess, residue. Uh, so you're like in a war zone. I mean, definitely it felt like that. If you didn't, know that it wasn't that, it would seem like could be like that. Even though I don't think even war zones are like that anymore. But I could be wrong. I mean, except for flare-ups. But but the thing that was happening was every so often somebody would shoot off a gun, so you'd hear bam, 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 like that. 8 or 9 rounds or something like that go off, and then you'd hear all the other fireworks going off, and then a minute later you'd hear it again. From a different area, because it was people shooting off guns, like rapid fire guns. Not as fast as we know, machine guns can be, but fast enough. That one every couple seconds, I guess. And and Kathy was getting freaked out by it more than I was. I don't know if that's because of my general lack of awareness when I might be in danger. I don't know if that's what it is, or if I don't have the same kind of history in my genes uh, that Kathy may have, because she wanted to get out of there, and and she was generally, she was scared that either bullets were going to come down from the sky or hit you in the head, or because that can certainly cause people damage, or if somebody was just going to inadvertently just shoot at the car or whatever. And of course, that potentially can happen. In fact, that can happen pretty much any time. But if people get mixed up with alcohol and other drug substances, and you don't know what they're going to do. So it was a good idea to get out of there. Um, and that kept on happening. We kept on going into other neighborhoods because we were trying to make a certain amount of money so that we could survive, uh, our current lifestyle. So that was something a little out of the usual that I've experienced in my life. Hearing about people shooting off guns, but not really seeing it. And I was talking to Juan Odie, one of the other remaining former members that believes in Tiendo, lives in Venezuela, but he was in Miami visiting some of his family. And speaking of guns, I asked him about what was happening in Venezuela, and I'm not going to go too much into things, but on the subject of guns, they're all outlawed. The people can't own them, but they do. And if they're caught with one, like Juan Odie had an experience where he was going into an area of the country to help somebody and get out of a bad situation, and it was considered to be a notoriously bad area to go into. So he had, ever since he was a youth growing up in Venezuela, he had rifles and pistol. So he brought a pistol with him, and it was loaded. And somehow the police uh, learned about it at some traffic stop or something, and he was able to offer funds, and the officer gave the gun back. And he says that's common in Venezuela, that the police aren't necessarily, 100% sticklers for the law. Maybe they're using their own judgment better, instead of automatically just arresting people for this reason and that reason. I'm not a pro gun person, but I think people have the right to own them. And but T and Do didn't feel like, well, they felt like the next level um, never intended for humans to make weapons to kill other humans with, which shows you how far astray that the human kingdom has become to where that's a normal condition, and even thought of as advanced in some ways because um, it's harder to think that the state can take control over you if you've got uh, a firearm. But the problem is the state still takes control of us, whether we have a firearm or not. Uh, to where everything's okay as long as we're not rocking the boat or doing something illegal or getting into hot water somehow, and then our choices can become problems. Uh, yeah, I'm distracted. Let me go to the chat. Warrior of Truth. Imagine you're pretty exhausted from setting the RV. You got more energy than I do. Yeah, we moved today. Every 3 weeks, with the plan that we have for where we park the RV, we have to change locations. And even though that's not necessarily what we did today by changing locations, because we stayed in the same park, but we changed sites so we didn't have to drive too far. But yeah, I'm tired. There's no question about it. It's not that easy to recover from work until 3 in the morning, driving uh, food deliveries, and then even if you're sleeping in, you're not really getting restored equally from I mean, for me, I'm using caffeine and to have some alertness, and then going in and out of businesses, picking up food and then taking them to people's residence, and then driving on to the next one, and the complications with that. To where you get an order and then you find out that the restaurant was closed and they just left their app on. So somebody ordered something and then there's nobody to fill the. So you just drove 5 miles to get to a place, and you don't necessarily get any compensation for that. So those kind of things happen all the time to delivery drivers. And but on New Year's Eve, Uber was kind of good to us, providing incentives, money incentives, and so we did okay. You know, I mean, if you looked at it on an hourly basis, we probably made close to $30 an hour for about 8 hours of work or more. And then you take your expenses out of that, of course, and you're not really making that much. And then technically you're supposed to pay taxes on that, which I don't know if I get around because I'm retired and I can make a certain amount of money without losing my Social Security. On and on and on. But yeah, Warrior of Truth, I hear you. It is energy consuming to move the RV. It's not terribly hard, and it's good to stay active when you get to be my age, especially. But anybody, I think, we can be too sedentary. Is that the right way to say that? Um, so Warrior of Truth says, I like the streaming idea. I think it will take off. Thanks for that vote of confidence, because Kathy's, she's in it, and I'm glad. It's good. Um, it's a little, it's a little strange sometimes, but I don't really say anything. If she's filming, inside the RV when, I'm cooking food or whatever, I'm not doing anything that I have to, close my mouth about. I mean, sure, there sometimes can be things I'm not going to talk about, but for the most part, I'm pretty open book. What you see is what you get. You're not seeing one side of me on these streams and then another side of me uh, on Kathy's stream and another side of me on no stream. I mean, so Tired Maine says, yeah, it's kind of crazy. I live in the city and I heard the fireworks and the guns too. I definitely remember eight rounds like they were emptying clips. Yeah, I know what you're saying. And he says, Tired Maine says, I kind of felt afraid one would come through the wall or window or something. It's interesting how some things can have different effects on each of us. Yeah, no, I hear you. It is a valid concern, of course, because even if they're shooting it in the air, uh, if it goes up, I don't know how far it goes up, but probably at least 200 yards or more, and so that little pellet, if it's coming down, I guess if it's not that heavy, I don't know what damage it would do to hitting somebody in the head, but I imagine it could definitely, it could probably knock you out, with a, and probably break the skin. But I know they're not that heavy, so maybe not, you know. But who wants to, really experience that? I mean, what's the real value of shooting a gun in the air? I mean, okay, you're defying the law. That some people enjoy that, and and it's just part of the, I mean, they're blowing things up. Okay, all these little bombs. That's what the song is all about, right? The bombs bursting in air. It's like conquering an enemy using weapons of destruction. And it's primitive. But the next level knows it, and it doesn't mean that it's evil, because the real meaning of evil, the way Tien Do understood it, and I believe makes sense to me, was separation from God, the next level, the older members, the creators of the planet and the life forms on it, which I was talking about before a little bit, and I got off the subject, but of how magical this reality is in reality. This reality in reality is extremely magical. So much so that probably most of us don't think about it that way. hardly at all. But that's where again my partner Kathy, she's been a breath of fresh air for me because she's automatically tuning into every little bug that's in the, I mean, she doesn't like flies, but little spiders, she thinks they're so cute. And she, she'll, if she finds one inside, she found one several months ago and she figured out how to, well, I mean, she killed another insect and fed it to the spider. And for several days, the spider was consuming it, staying in the same spot, and then went away for a number of days and then showed up again. And she gave it another bug, a bigger one, and the spider was eating that up for a while, eating off of it, and it was like our pet. And then he disappeared again, and then we changed locations, and we don't know if he's died or what's happened because they don't live that long. So, but I mean, the point is that like when I first met Kathy, we were driving together because we right away were headed to the West Coast from Vermont and Indiana, where Kathy had been living at the time, and she had been driving Uber for about 5 years before she met me, or more, and so she'd be wanting to pass people because she generally drives on the fast side, and so she's passing people. And if somebody was in the left lane, and she'd be like motioning with her hands for them to move over. And I remember thinking, well, I guess that could work. I mean, you could actually influence somebody in another car, the way I believe, um, whether it's by your thoughts or by sending them a discarnate that could interface with the person in the car and their discarnates. Um, all of a sudden now then they have the thought of looking in the mirror or thinking that, maybe I shouldn't be in the left lane instead of thinking before that they had the right to be there and they were going fast enough by the speed limit. And so therefore anybody that was behind them that wanted to go faster was in the wrong. And some people think that way. And I understand that thinking. There's times where I didn't want to drive any faster, and somebody wanted to drive faster than me. Many times that's happened. And if I was going the speed limit, I mean, if in that situation, that was a freeway a lot of times where there was no reason why the person couldn't pull over to let you pass. But in some cases, I'd have somebody on my tail through the roads in Vermont, which are just one lane in each direction, winding through mountains and stuff, and at night and stuff, and there could be deer, and you can go around a corner, and there could be a deer there in your road. So you definitely aren't that confident about driving it. Certainly not much beyond the speed limit, if at all. And so, what I would do is I'd find a place to pull over. But it can be pretty um, to somebody that's got a sensitive receiver. Um, having somebody on your tail that's getting really close, and so they're obviously, wanting to get past you, and you're trying to find your way and directions or whatever it is. It's just intimidating. it's just poor behavior to just come up on people and and be on their back. In my opinion, I'm not saying they're evil. I'm not saying that they're wrong by the next level, but next level members are very considerate of one another and anybody they're working with. When it was in the classroom and we got jobs in the world, and I worked in hotel sometimes, and as a cook, I worked my way up to getting more responsibilities. So I was like a sous chef sometimes, and I became an amateur pastry chef. But I was preparing pastries and baking. I did a lot of baking, and I even got a lot of my baking experience initially from being in the classroom because we had a bakery. We called it the yeast lab. Anyway, but I it's I forgot what I was trying to get to with that. Got too far off the beaten path. So I'll go to the chat room again. I'm trying to keep it down on volume because Kathy, she went down. She went to bed. She's going to try to get up early and go drive for to make some money that we need. And so anyway, Tired Man says, yeah, it's kind of, let's see, oh, Mr. Soy, yeah, you're here. Good to see you. And I know you were in Kathy's stream today. I think I heard Kathy address you at one point. And Warrior of Truth, too. I heard you were there, too. So I'm glad to see you, helping us in whatever ways, I'm not saying that you're trying to help us, but it ends up being a help to us because we're trying to monetize Kathy's channel. I could have monetized this channel a long time ago. I just didn't want to sell the truth. And I know that's I know that's I feel like that's an honorable thing to do in the sense, but it's also, I think, over spiritualizing it because T and Do were practical. And if they had a task to do, and for the next level, which sharing next level information is a task that people can do now, uh, um, if if anybody is like me in that regard of wanting to share next level information with other people, then they're going to be wanting to do that. It's not going to be like doing it in order to earn membership. No, they're going to want to. And even though it might be hard, they're going to want to still want to do it. Like the information like comes with uh, part of the desire to share it with other people. Um, and I mean, once somebody believes it, that is, if they don't believe it, then they still might want to share parts of it. And so that's fine because belief is a process as well. And the way I think about belief is that it's really what we trust. Like we believe what we trust. So, in other words, if somebody's telling us a story about something that happened in the news, if we feel like we can trust that story, then we believe it. If we see holes in the story, then we believe it less. But we could still believe it. We could still believe that the event happened because um, Yeah, even though we can be fooled, uh, um, that's been made into an extreme in the last 20 years um, by folks that are pretty much saying that every event that happens, like a school shooting or something, is a type of false flag event. And at first they would say things like the event didn't even happen and it was actors. And I think actually on some of the events that were stimulated by certain higher ups in the government, I think part of their teams that do that kind of thing, and it doesn't have to be big teams, it can just be one person. I mean, actually, but part of the strategy would be, in addition to fostering an event and also, sticking in clues, uh, and also making mistakes in that process. Um, they're sowing seeds of misinformation on top of true information on purpose in order to keep the subject confusing. And then you see people going for years and years and years uh, investigating it. Um, and of course, most of us don't have the time to investigate much. But then there are some that do have the time and they do investigations and we learn a lot. And then the mainstream media goes after them, tries to censor them. And I've been censored. And a lot of the people that I listen to in the news, like on YouTube over a lot of years, have been censored and lost their monetary, but they still wanted to do it. They still felt to do it, and have been providing services to people. I feel that way about a number of different YouTubers, influencers, as they say. I know I go all over the place. So Mr. Soy says, is it possible that another older member will appear? Well, it's not something that I can ever say is it impossible. You know, um, it's where, when, how, and why that become the key components of the question. And I'll go right to the why. In other words, if T and let's say T and O are the older members that we're talking about, um, then why would they come back uh, um, before they said they were going to come back? Um, I mean, what reason would they have to do that if they left the formula for growing in their direction, which they have, and uh, and they've left it in many different ways of speaking. So, and that's basically learning our lessons by having a human vehicle and being of service by getting their information out and being willing to stand in their defense. Their defense of being from, it's a big defense to stand for them. It's a huge, huge task to stand for them. because you will be met with individuals that call you names and things, but to some degree, once somebody really starts to um, uh, um, gravitate to Tiando's information and assimilate it into their minds, understand it enough, and identify with it to some degree as making sense, which is all going to be like in degrees that can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in our minds as we deal with our humanness, and the misinformation that's saturated this planet and all the life forms on it for a long time. But the next level information has a special power with it, a special force with it. It's like a brighter cell, you know, if you want to look at it as, or it's like it's plasma is the description of the physical element, plasma-like. Doe didn't even say, call it plasma. The mind, spirit and mind are the same synonymous terms, according to Tiendo, which makes a lot of sense to me once I learned that from Tiendo, especially when looking at scripture that talks about spirit, that it's actually a mental birth that Jesus was talking about. And when he said there was going to be a flesh birth, water, birth by water, and then a spiritual birth, a mind birth, because it's the mind that's growing. And the mind doesn't grow by just accumulating information. The, the brain part of the mind, the memory of the vehicle grows by just taking in more information. But if it's not next level information, then it doesn't extend to growing the mind actually of the individual into something greater than it was before it gravitated to that information. Um, so so anyway, in terms of older member coming back, the why doesn't make any sense as a reason to come back anytime soon. But Doe did feel that eventually there will be another civilization started like this one, and there'll be a new crop of Luciferians. In other words, minds that changed to that were once in favor or once even members of the next level. In other words, were in the next level safekeeping, even if it was just being saved on ice, so to speak, not literal ice, but being saved in a holding area. What humans might talk about as the middle, purgatory, for instance. So those individuals that end up being re-exposed to the truth through while they're trying to take over a vehicle to have an experience, a growth experience with going closer towards adult membership in the next level, to where they're not just on ice, so to speak, but they have more significant tasks. to do than even elementary tasks that are to be done in the next level, that the next level does assign some of the souls that have grown to. Okay, um, so those are the individuals that end up going against Tiendo that had that experience before, were in their keeping before, talking about the souls. Um, um, and were even helped to choose a human vehicle uh, that they would go, that they, if they end up going against Tiendo, and that I think includes influencing others in that direction as being a bigger challenge to recover from. Because once we're invested in telling people what's not, then the lower forces have a bigger hold on us. I mean, when you're talking about the next level, that is. I mean, you can say that about me too, of course, because I say things that I believe are not accurate or true or the highest truth or a beneficial direction or a positive direction in the overall scheme of becoming a member of the next level. And I can hear the influences, knocking on my head right now and saying, "Oh yeah, Sawyer, this and that, you think you're something, and that's all like worthless to me. It doesn't do me any good to beat myself up for things I haven't accomplished. Um, uh, it's and nobody else really has the judgment. But so the people that go against, they're potentially playing with fire in the sense that they're judging themselves and they get karma from that. That karma idea, Doe does talk about it sometimes in the Beyond Human tapes, and you can see what he said about it for yourself. I encourage that, of course. But but it's the idea that what you seek, what you reap, what you sow, you shall reap, right? And I think probably a lot of people, uh, a majority maybe even, believe there's a truth to that, even if it's not put in the Hindu, the karmic kind of terminology that seem to appear from the Eastern religions interface with the Western culture, from my observation. But so so going against then is like the beginning of a new crop of lower forces. So that the next level, when they see that individuals are going in that direction and staying in that direction, even after many opportunities to change that direction. See, that's the thing. You could have somebody that goes in that direction against Tiendo, for example, at one time, and then uh, a few days later, they're in favor of things about Tiendo, or I'm not, I can't describe how that can work in any one individual, but something will keep coming up into their minds if they had an association with the next level. And I think anybody that's even curious about whether Tiendo could be telling the truth, um, the next level helps those for sure with being able to hold on to it, because this world does not vibrate in such a way that it's easy to hold on to for very long. Um, but it can be held on to. But it's got to be more than holding on to it. It's got to grow. Now, sometimes growth, a lot of times, growth only takes place when we try different directions. And a lot of times, when a person is growing, when they are recognizing that certain directions of thought and behavior aren't appealing to them anymore, or they don't really see it eye to eye. They don't really vibrate on it completely the same way as somebody that is committed to that way of thinking vibrates about it. You know, or you see people that are saying this and that, and then they're being hypocrites at the same time. And of course, people could say that about me as well, that I'm a hypocrite. And, so it becomes, you know, uh, it's what you're hypocritical about. If you're hypocritical about um, things that are deceitful to people, like you're saying one thing that people should do to earn money, let's say, but then you're on the side, you're compromising that ideal. There's Atlas again, those four blue comet that split into four pieces that we saw some years ago before the current three-eye atlas. But the same observatory, I think, discovered it. But so it's not a simple. We can't evaluate somebody else, their journey, because we don't know what their package entails. We don't know what their discarnate package, their genetic package, their their what society, what they determined was right and wrong and good and bad and in society, and true or not, and true or false, and of course the society that teaches that the religions have the truth. It's interesting, of course, that they probably all do, but the truth is uh, there's many pieces of the truth. It's like a picture, made up of 1,000 pieces in a puzzle. And if one of them's gone, then that whole picture isn't complete, right? But you can still see, with a few gone, you can still see the overall images that are being given. The body of information is still apparent. And so there's so many people that are talking about their own enlightenment and their awakeness and wokeness, and you know and they act like they've arrived at a place. I haven't arrived. In other words, I have to keep on going towards the T&O information, or I will lose it. I will literally lose it. It will not even be in my memory anymore. hardly. Memories, they get dimmer and dimmer. You could have an experience that some people would call a miracle. That might be a miracle because we don't understand the technicality of how it came to be, and 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 that can actually propel somebody in a direction for a while. But if they don't embrace uh, experiences, or they move it into the idea that their self is being built up by it. Um, I don't know if the audio is still coming across, but the video, okay. I lost the video there for a little bit. But they're, apparently OBS went down and reboot. So I'll go back to what I was talking about is that uh, if somebody can have an awakening moment or an awakening experience, I'm not belittling that. I think those are great. I mean, I've had a number of them in my life, before the classroom and, you know, and after the classroom, that seemed to be significant ideas or thoughts or directions to take or motivations to start something or finish something, whatever it is, or realization of an idea. Like I remember one time I was driving in Vermont and I had this realization that I could actually uh, try to receive a thought that has a caliber of intensity to it that um, could affect my biology to where even it could stop my heart. And I thought about that scripture that talked about men's hearts will fail them, talking about human hearts will fail them from fear. And and I didn't recognize that as a reality before that experience. So that was a type of awakening to that, but yet at the same time, maybe it was just a coincidence that I had that thought. Is there any evidence that that can happen? Well, I think there is, and I've had more evidence that our thoughts can affect our biology a great deal, actually. And that's why Kathy's been listening to this um, musician, positive thinking media developer, uh, who's saying, the cells of my body are healthy. And she's singing it, over and over again, like a chant, right? Like a mantra. And it was interesting when I first heard that because it's to my vehicle, it sounded corny, like silly to do that. But that's a program. See, that's a program that thinks that's silly, in my opinion. It's a negative program that doesn't want me. I'm not talking about singing it. I don't think that makes any difference if someone wants to sing it or not. But to think it, to me, is a positive. Um, because thinking about it is like hoping for it. And hoping means that you're um, you're looking forward to something. You're looking towards something. You're wanting to manifest something more than you have, or in this case, you want to manifest better health. So you're singing that song, and then that's like programming your vehicle to believe it and want to do things to support the idea. And so all of a sudden the person starts changing their diet and, you know, relationships or whatever it is, and they learn more about it. And they may get healthier and and that may fade also. That's what I was saying before. Like you can have an aha moment, uh, but it seems like eventually, unless you're continuing to keep it, hold on to it, you kind of lose it. It it diminishes over time as the force that it once was, and that's not a bad thing because then the person has to is challenged to drum up the thirst to try to get the next aha moment. I mean, it's not even conscious necessarily. It could be conscious, but it's if that person has thirst in their hearts for the truth, for reality, for the greatest goodness, and they haven't um, embraced the way that the negative forces would have us look at goodness. Like for instance, if they haven't uh, if they continue to try to program to have good outcomes with relationships with others and with relationship with their own vehicle, their own body, and their own mind, and you know, that's all potentially positive developments. And and T and Do at one point gave us a meditation. I think it's one of the first 10 audio tapes in the list that of tapes that uh, I've been sharing with people for 15 years before being sued for it. Um, anyway, but was this, well, The Power of Goodness was written by T. It was not even in the book. But because T was comparing goodness as being a magnet that attracts other people. And because what they're attracted to isn't, I mean, they may be attracted to the vehicle, uh, but that can also be a detraction from the mind if the mind has, uh, well, whatever the mind has in it, that somebody is attracted to that vehicle, then they potentially got the other side of the coin difficulty. Um, where another, the form, the higher, well, a higher form of attraction is when you're attracted to the mind of somebody else and their goodness. Now, the way that society would label that goodness as being like humanitarian, right? And it is. It is about the best that a human can be during the time that an older member is not present uh, to be humanitarian. Now, what that means and how that plays out, that's a whole nother conversation that doesn't even really need to take place because it's it's what we feel to do that counts. What we want to do, not what we should do. We shouldn't. I mean, I'm not saying that there's something wrong with wanting to be a humanitarian more than you are, Um, but but we are. But there's a time and a place for it as well. And just being a humanitarian doesn't necessarily get any stars in your crown, so to speak. It's like you know, you got both extremes being played on us all the time, whether we identify it or not. And I'm not saying there's not other aspects being played on people all the time, but as well. But uh, you've got, you know, the redefinition of what's positive, the redefinition of what's goodness, you know, so that if you start to talk about like some of the people that would talk about T and Do to me years ago, this really happened more, and would say, well, if they really were from the kingdom of God, what good works did they do? And you know, who did they feed the hungry? Did they help clothe, provide clothing to those that don't have clothing? Did they give somebody a place to stay when they had no place to, when they were homeless and cold? And uh, you know, did they help people in this way or that way with their money or whatever they had? You know, like if they had two coats, would they give one away? And if they didn't do that, the person would then say, well, they can't be from the kingdom of heaven if they weren't doing that because Jesus said that that's what you would be doing. And and yet um, that's like a trick of the lower forces to put up an illusionary thinking that was part of the lesson program 2,000 years ago on this planet that wouldn't be the same lesson program uh, uh, during the time that T and Do came, and even now, potentially, because T and Do's information and the pictures of them and their voices, their literal voices, are still able to be heard. So as far as I'm concerned, they're still present, but they are not present. You know, in some ways, they're not present. Well, obviously, they're not present in the way that they were incarnate. So, we don't have the availability of sending a note to T and Do and asking, you know, what they think about Trump stealing oil tankers from Venezuela or confiscating. You know, we don't know what they would think about that. I mean, we can kind of second guess it, but we probably won't get it right exactly. Sometimes we will. Um, but, you know, that law that was given to the sixth graders of thou shalt not steal, I believe did come from the next level. They're not in favor of stealing from other people or countries, stealing from other countries, even though technically the oil isn't there anybody's to begin with because they didn't create it. They've learned how to tap into it. And so, you know, but in this human kingdom, they think that that's, you know, they own it once they tapped into it. And for all intents and purposes, they do. Okay, and they're providing it, and it becomes a commodity that can benefit everybody to have. But when Jesus said that all all men's sins could be forgiven them, except a blasphemy against the holy mind, the Holy Spirit, that's talking about the divine mind. You know, if you want to talk about it in that term, or the higher mind, the highest mind that we can imagine. I can't imagine a higher mind than Tiendo, because they were talking about becoming a member of the organization that created the planet and the life forms on it to be a school. And I can't imagine a higher mind than that. And I don't need to. Any attempts to imagine a higher mind than that, uh, or thinking that we have to be able to, know who developed that or where that came from, or before we can believe in it, is another trick of the lower forces to get us to not look at it, look at the Tiendo information, and not only look at it, but consider it, consider what they were teaching and approaching the difficulties or the challenges with with the whole story. Because there's a reason why we know that the media, the mainstream media, has become very biased in certain directions. Um, and so if they're going after a story and they're telling people that they're bad in that story, like T and O and crew, that's a signal right there that there's more to the story to be heard, and that they may not actually be in that category that they were just slated for. Let me go to the chat. I'm sorry if I'm not finishing, paragraphs and ideas very well. I think it is part of my tiredness. I'm a little less able to do that than usual. So I'm probably going to close the stream in a few minutes. I just wanted to connect again because it's been a number of days since I have, and there's a lot of things I told people I was going to talk about, but I don't know that I have the energy for it right now. I was going to talk about Kathy's stream. She talks about her experiences with ghosts and cemeteries and things, and uh, and so I had some things to say about it. We don't necessarily agree on everything, but so what? That doesn't mean squat as long as we're not, offended by the other person's not believing the way that we believe. You can still work together with somebody, and you can also still keep on examining their point of view and your own point of view to get a higher point, a better, more accurate point of view. That's what higher is to me. More of what's reality that we don't always have much availability of, because it's a matter of understanding it. So we can have the words that depict the greater realities, like many people think about the words of Jesus, which I feel the same about. That he was describing a lot of what's real relative to that time period of uh, starting to give the human kingdom the idea that there is a kingdom to graduate into, that they have their dwelling places uh, in outer space. Um, So I don't think another old member is coming during this civilization. And Doe talks about it in the Beyond Human tapes that he feels like he will be returning, but it's not for a teaching time. They did the teaching time already, and that's evidenced by all the information they left behind because that's like a teacher. It's an amazing teacher, and it's a teacher that somebody is only going to get and benefit from if they go after it, and to the degree that they go after it. That's the only way they're going to benefit from it because the next level is all about free will every step of the way. And this is an example of it. That, you're not going to have an organization that says, okay, well, if you come into my house every Sunday, I'm going to teach you about the kingdom of God. And if you support this ministry, then we'll give to the poor and things, and we'll use it to live on, and we'll be able to spread the message to other people that can benefit from it. Now that can all be a positive. It can all be a positive, and it can also be a trap of thinking that you're in your best spot by being engaged in that kind of, but then shutting out new information that comes along. But I don't believe, because Doe said that before it becomes a new civilization here on Earth, because he felt like the Earth was still in good shape and just needs a little refurbishing, like cleaning up, like getting rid of the space junk he mentioned, and I don't know if he said this, but I think he has in the past talked about how the recycling process would take care of some of the toxins that humans have, flooded some of the waterways with and things like that. They can clean the atmosphere. They know how to do all that. So that would be happening before a member would come. But Doe felt like it also might be that the Earth becomes a what they might call like a heavenly body. In other words, heavenly body would mean that members of the next level could come and go from it without fear that humans were going to try to shoot down their spacecraft or whatever it is, if they have that capacity to do that. In that capacity, they might not, that context of heavenly body is where there are humans or human equivalents growing in terms of their grades in school in the human kingdom, of getting into humanness and all the ways that we know that people are into their humanness, and and that there would be no lower forces on that. There would no be there wouldn't be any souls that were trying to get you onto some other track that wasn't what the next level was wanting for that planet to experience. So you could grow the entire civilization that would probably be, for the most part, peace loving and honest and helpful to one another, and but it's part of the human kingdom that there's going to be rivalries, there's going to be jealousies, but there just wouldn't be the lower forces to accentuate those things into bigger and bigger problems. And so there would be a certain amount of growth on a planet that didn't have those lower forces on them. But when those lower forces are on the planet, like we have in the current civilization, then they are amplifying the negatives. even though they might not look like negatives. Like, see, I'll just try to see if I can finish that thought a little better. Because a negative is back to that idea that separation from the older member is a negative. So if somebody is not asking in some way, shape, or form for some kind of higher guidance, then they're not going to be drawing it in. Um, and they're going to be more susceptible to the forces that want to steal that soul for themselves. Like I've talked about probably in almost every broadcast, I believe there is good and evil, and there is a enemy. Um, and that's why so many things in this world are described as good or evil, or an enemy, or a friend or a foe, or because this planet is saturated with individuals that are against seeing those information. Anthol Kinsadicious Fowl says, "Brother, you survived some wild stuff. God must be looking out for you. Happy New Year, Sawyer," says Chris and Lady Vessel. That's funny. Thank you. And yeah, I appreciate uh, the positivity from Anthol Kinsadicious Fowl. Okay, that's a pretty multifaceted name there. Oh, and Sasquatch Sean, I forgot to read yours, I'm sorry. Hi Sawyer, watched an old video of yours where you talked about star cluster groups. Oh yeah, I'm glad you came back and asked about that. Did the groups have different roles or duties? Also, were check partners always in the same star cluster? That is a good question. I should ask Juan Artie this question. By the way, anybody that wants to communicate with Juan Odie, you can write to the website that's called uh, heavensgatealso.com. And, and when you send an email to rep at heavensgatealso.com, it goes to Juan Odie. And now uh, he's from Venezuela, so he speaks Spanish and, well, but he also speaks English. He went to school in the United States. But it's not his first language, so and he doesn't, he does keep up with it because for whatever reason. But he was in the group as well, and during the time, I don't know if he was in the group during the star cluster time. He might not have been because he was part of the 19 that Tiendo sent out of the group in 1976 to have a different experience, and then some of them ended up back in the group even to the end before they left. But so Wanoti's there for people to send a message to if they want to. And but I'll try to go into my memory. I see us in a house. That was a big house in about, I think it was the Kerrville area of Texas at the time. And this would have been in the early 80s, 1980s. And um, we were in different star clusters. I was a Procyon, named after the star cluster of the constellation Procyon. And there was the other ones were Altair, um, Sirius, um, Procyon, the dog star, and also Fomalhaut in that order. They were given to us in that order. And Altair was red, Sirius was blue, Procyon was green, and Fomalhaut was yellow. And we had jumpsuits, like, overalls that people wear, like on construction sites, that had a place where you could put your hammer on the leg, for example, one piece or a zipper up the front. And and on those jumpsuits, on the lapel of the collar, Tiendo had some of the crew doing embroidery of those four colors in that order of red, blue. I think it was red, blue, or maybe it was red, green, blue, yellow. Or maybe it was red, blue, green, yellow. One of those combinations, I think, was right in the colors. Now, as far as I know, nobody switched colors or switched cluster groups. And there was probably no more than like about a dozen. I'm not trying to say that for a prophetic reason. I'm just trying to just generalize on how many people. Well, actually, I could probably get more specific because we had around that time definitely under 70 and over 50 members of the group. Um, so, split into four clusters, that it wasn't all that meaningful, except that it provided a sense of organization. Um, uh, so I could see in this house that we were in uh, that we didn't have much furniture at all at that time. We had bunk beds so that we could sleep, 40 people in a single family big house that might have had like four bedrooms in it. And so, you'd have bunks. And I don't think we were in the bedrooms in a star cluster order. So I think there were different people from different star clusters in each bedroom because there were different criteria for who was assigned to which we call them chambers, because T and O were trying to help our programming start fresh with new ways of thinking about things. If people in the human kingdom say that they went to a bed, some people would automatically have sexual thoughts, you know, and other people, have, I don't know, whatever kind of thoughts of their experiences with a bed, and that could be growing up with their parents and they used to play games in the bed, things like that. So, you can have all different memories that are stimulated from it. So part of the uh, redoing of our programming was new terminology that didn't stimulate those same kind of thoughts unless we made that happen, unless we were hit by those ideas still and didn't get rid of them. So the object was to get rid of all the other previous thinking that we had before we joined, getting rid of the past. Not because we're ashamed of it, uh, but because the more we focus on that, the more we're actually drawing our minds back into that or holding on to that. And it restricts how much the mind can actually grow by, because since we believed that T and Do were who they said they were, not because they told us that, because each member felt like they had experience with that being true. They just, like myself, for instance, I can't really talk for anybody else, except when they have expressed this, which some have to me, that it just made sense when T and Do were talking at a meeting. It just made sense to me, and I was at a point in my life to where there weren't any strong influences that could influence me much. Even though, getting to that, I was a musician and I was with a band and we were doing gigs in Newport, Oregon, and it was, we were trying to get bigger and better, and so that was something, but it wasn't enough for me to. When T and Do came around and gave that meeting in Walport, Oregon, and I attended it and felt like this was for me immediately, I didn't think twice about uh, ever playing flute again, for instance. I had been playing for a year at that time, and it meant a lot to me. The music that I had at the time meant a lot to me, but it became such a. I just knew that this was what I wanted, you know, to be a part of. Not to be a part of it, but just wanted to go with it. Wanted to follow with T and Do's motion, which was never a negative experience. Never. There was never anything that was negative about it. Even if I was corrected, many times on different things that I didn't uh, make the best decision upon or started to do that was detrimental to that forward motion. So, that still wasn't a negative because I learned from it. I got experience from it. Getting into something and then getting out of something that I didn't want to be into anymore. It's like somebody conquering an addiction to alcohol or drugs or something that, you grow to have experience by conquering that addiction enough. Doesn't mean you won't backslide sometimes, but you would probably keep that thought out that you could backslide. But at the same time, you would keep your defenses up as well so that something couldn't, casually just influence you to go, fall off the wagon in that regard. So we're all potentially coming in and out of various degrees of addictive behavior, I think. I mean, it may not look like an addiction like, heroin or something, to where you're strung out on the streets and, using dirty needles and trying to steal from somebody in order to get your next fix. That's probably, you know, uh, a fairly remote thing to happen overall to people. But even that can be recovered from. And, if they're in such a condition to where that's the best they can do, the next level can help them. If the next level feels like uh, they've got their mind in their direction enough, there has to be the next level isn't um, a charity organization. Um, somebody doesn't have to become a member of the next level, of course. What's going to happen to their soul if they don't? We don't know. Doe talked about being saved on ice if they were separating from the world in their own way. And even compared that to like a militia group that was not fighting against the government, but didn't have any trust in the government, didn't believe in the government. I mean, and Doe wasn't promoting violence by any means by saying that, but he was giving us an example that would encompass a lot of different examples by using it to show us that we can have these spiritual ideas about things. We can have these political ideas about things that aren't necessarily next level ideas about things. Um, Chick Magnet, the music. I'm not a chick magnet. That's silly, if that's what you're saying. Well, the music is? Yeah, well, I don't play it for that reason. I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't since leaving the group, and even before I joined the group, didn't have a desire to be attractive for me to the opposite gender. That I thought music could, you know, be an avenue for that attraction. I did have some of that on my mind. It was mostly subconscious. I wasn't like doing it to try to attract uh, women to me. But I know if I did a good job, I mean, if I did some decent music, you know, there was the type of ego that I was getting from it in the early time when I was gigging in Oregon. So more about the star clusters, just to finish that. So yeah, I think for the most part, check partners were always in the same star cluster, but that didn't mean that there couldn't be two different individuals from a star cluster doing a task together. Um, I just don't. really have any conscious examples of that on my mind. But that is a reality, that people weren't limited by the star cluster they were in, even though some of our opinions uh, would have been uh, there's a certain amount of testing that happens when somebody is in the group was getting more attention from T and Do in person than we were getting. Automatically, I would see them as greater than I, and but it wasn't all that conscious, and it wasn't all that strong. Maybe for some other students, it was stronger. You know, some people have a stronger jealousy streak than others. I can remember being jealous of individuals that were working closer with T&O, and because I could see them, like T&O weren't trying to hide behind walls in order to not stimulate somebody's jealousy, because they would get letters, you know, from students expressing themselves about being jealous, etc. So they knew it was happening. And so you would think that they would have gone behind closed doors so that people wouldn't know what was going on. They could even schedule a meeting with people that others wouldn't ever really find out about, even though it was kind of hard because, you know, when you have 40 people living in a house, uh, you kind of observe most of what's going on in that house. Except some of us went out to have an autocraft task, a job in the world, in order to earn sticks, money, to pay our bills, to pay for our food. So, I can picture in this house I was talking about, you know, a half hour ago, um, where Tiendo had us put like strips, lines down on the carpet. They were all nice houses, with, you know, in good condition, excellent condition, but no furniture. But so they had nice carpets, and so Tiendo had a crew actually use tape, and it might have been in the color of the star cluster, to designate the area where members of the star cluster would spend their time when they weren't in the in the consuming area, consuming, or in the rest area, resting, or doing some other task that took them somewhere else outside of that part of the house. That might have been like a room or a den or something, you know, at one point, but now is being used for a star cluster where we each had our own chair and some kind of a table to write on, or you know, like even like um, those little tables that you know you have one per person, little folding tables. Anyway, you know, each of us had something like that to sit at during the time that we were awake, and so we didn't leave that star cluster until or that part of the room, because there would be an opening there as the door. So it's like making it into a craft where you had different sections of the craft, but there were no windows or walls. So you could see what, like Sirius was across the hall from where I was, or I could see Fomalhaut, And they a certain amount of, like they might have a couch in that area and an easy chair and then just chairs where you could sit at a desk and write if that's what you wanted to do, or if you had a task to do something regarding that. But we played games during that time. We didn't have jobs during that a lot of that time, so we had a lot of time on our hands, and that could be very boring. Also, to those that wanted more excitement, that would have been a challenge for them. I remember at times thinking, "Gosh, I don't know, these games are." Well, I didn't consciously. I wasn't consciously bored. All right, so and I remember that Altair were like the comm center people handling the affairs of the house, because you can't have everybody can't be the cook in the kitchen. Somebody's got to provide some support services, so that the cook can do their job better. Even though, in our labs, uh, we would cook and clean for ourselves so that we'd be done with the cleaning when the food was ready to serve. Because some members of the crew were cleaning the whole time while others were cooking. So, there were all kinds of like combinations happening. And one of the reasons you left the group was urges. The biggest reason I left the group was because I was lack on my discipline. And yes, that did lead to giving into urges. OBS just disconnected and connected again. So I don't know what you lost with that, but if you want regarding that question of urges and leaving the group, you can read about. I have a lot to say about it. It's not. You can say maybe I'm just avoiding the subject, but there is more to say than what we've heard from the media on that score of why I left. But I definitely was choosing not to follow all the procedures and letting it go in my mind, thinking it wasn't that important, that procedure. So you can read about it on my blog at sawyerhg.wordpress.com. That's okay, Chris. I don't mind. I don't mind the question. I'm not thinking that you're judging me. In fact, the way you even or worded it shows me that you were trying to be subtle about it, maybe in order to not offend me. And I appreciate you know, uh, that. I do. Because some people, just come right out and say something that might be hurtful for me to think about. And there's a certain amount of hurtfulness to my thinking about leaving. And I deal with that almost every day, feeling like not doing a very good job, and I flunked, and yeah, I know I flunked that classroom, that test, period. But it's a member of the next level, which is something that I am still seeking to become someday. I guess I mean because I just feel like that's part of my family. It's not. It's not like I'm trying to earn something or trying to be something special. A member of the next level, every member of the next level is automatically special when it comes to relative to uh, even the greatest human, whoever the greatest human might be, because they are evolutionarily a strata above human, just like a human is a strata above the animal kingdom. It has its vast differences. But so the blog is the name of the document on my blog that is somewhat of a minor autobiography, beginning of it anyway, is sawyerhg.wordpress.com, and the name of the document is Sawyer's Story. So if you search my blog for that, you'll find it, and there's another document attached to it that I think talks more about what you brought up as urges. Sasquatch says, thanks for answering my question. Have a good night. Thank you very much. I'm glad I could answer that question. Um, and I think I'm about to turn in, say goodnight myself, because it's 12:16 and I want to get to bed by 1. So good night, folks.